But my question tonight is their attempt to condemn and distance themselves genuine, or is it part of a PR campaign? And I know that that is not a politically correct question, and I'm not trying to be politically correct right now. Let me start with Professor Badawi, whose quote I just read, who's so angry that the world links the killer to Islam. The first thing, Badawi mentions us questioning someone's religious institution. First, we can't ignore the fact that the shooter at Fort Hood, that the mosque he attended in Northern Virginia, the Dar al-Hijru Islamic Center in Falls Church, Virginia, who also has come out and condemned the attack. But this mosque is perhaps best known as the same mosque that 3 9/11 hijackers attended prior to flying planes into the Pentagon. In addition, one of the imams, the religious leaders, who was at that point employed at that mosque, his name is Anwar al-Awlaki. He now lives in the Middle East, and he has publicly stated on his blog that he supports the shooter's actions at Fort Hood. And it's now known that this imam, who had contact with 9/11 attackers, also had contact with the shooter at Fort Hood. So we have to question the mosque which the shooter attended. In addition, this Professor Badawi, whose quote I read, is a man that himself has not distanced himself from violence. He issued a fatwa. Fatwa is a Muslim ruling outlining 6 different conditions in which a wife may properly be beaten by her husband. He played a part in a November 2004 fatwa by the International Union of Muslim Scholars, decreeing, and this is really important, that it is a religious duty for all able-bodied Muslims inside and outside Iraq to wage jihad against the American military. In June 2006, Badawi justified Muslim suicide bombings as a legitimate tactic of jihad. His friend and his mentor, a man by the name of Yosef al-Qadawi, has been listed in the United States since 1999 as a global terrorist. And Badawi, who is a member of the Board of Trustees of the International Union of Muslim Scholars and a member of the European Council for Fatwa and Research, both groups are organized and headed by this man, this international terrorist, Yosef al-Qadawi. And in 2007, Badawi, the man whose quote I read, he traveled to the Middle Eastern nation of Qatar, where he was a featured guest speaker at a conference honoring Qaradawi. And lots of you are familiar in 2007 with the Holy Land Foundation trial in Texas, which was going after this Holy Land Foundation with its ties to fundraising to Hamas and other militant groups. And wouldn't you know it, one of the people who was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator is Professor Badawi himself. So it leads us to question some of the connections that are going on with this gentleman. ISNA, the group that came out, this large American group, as American as apple pie, the group that came out and condemned the Fort Hood attack. This group was also listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in this terror trial that took place in Texas in 2007. But there's more about the Islamic Society of North America that we can't ignore either, which is that it focuses heavily on providing Wahhabi Islam, information on Wahhabi Islam. That in its pure form, if you're not familiar with the different movements in Islam, in its pure form is what Al-Qaeda embraces. It's not a group that is known for their tolerance, even within the Muslim community. Okay? They condemn and attack their own if they don't follow their certain types of beliefs. But ISNA is a Wahhabi Islam organization, and it's funded by the Saudis, Saudi Arabia. And many of the mosques that were built in the United States were built with money funneled through ISNA and the Saudi Arabian government, and they control, some say, a majority of the mosques in America and have control as to who gets to speak and what is taught and the literature that is taught in those mosques. There's an Islamic scholar in the US by the name of Stephen Schwartz, and he describes the Islamic Society of North America as one of the chief, this is a quote from him, conduits through which the radical Saudi form of Islam passes into the United States. There's another man, who some of you might be familiar with, a man by the name of Stephen Emerson, who works a lot on issues of terrorism and the dangers in the United States. And he writes that the Islamic Society of North America is a radical group hiding under a false veneer of moderation that convenes annual conferences where Islamic militants have been given a platform to incite violence and promote hatred. For instance, he cites that the Al-Qaeda supporter and PLO official Yusuf al-Qaradawi was invited to speak at one of their conferences. They've held fundraisers for terrorists after a Hamas leader Musa Marzouk was arrested and eventually deported in '97. The Islamic Society of North America raised money for his defense. ISNA has condemned the US government's post-9/11 seizure of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad's financial assets, and they put out publications that often seem to champion militant Islamic doctrines. The experts say, don't get it wrong, that the Islamic Society of North America is not a terrorist organization, but they sponsor extremists, racists, people who call for jihad against the United States. In September 2002, a full year after the September 11th attacks at the Islamic Society of North America's annual conference, they still refuse to acknowledge Osama bin Laden's role in the terrorist attacks. So there's lots and lots that we can question about the Islamic Society of North America, this largest Muslim group, the group that's come out and condemned the attack at Fort Hood, but yet there are all of these connections to violence and hatred and anti-America. So it seems strange in a way that in a recent New York Times article on Fort Hood, the Islamic Society of North America, their president, someone who was you're probably familiar with because she's involved in the American government now, Ingrid Mattson. She stated, "I don't understand why the Muslim American community has to take responsibility for the shooter. The Army has had at least as much time and opportunity to form and shape this person as the Muslim community has." And I have to strongly disagree with Ms. Mattson, because the Muslim American community, particularly her organization, the largest Muslim group in the United States, a group that's condemned the attack, has a lot of explaining to do to the American public. Because below the surface, they are connected quietly and not so quietly to groups, to individuals and ideas that support an ideology of hatred and violence and un-American thought. It's a very difficult issue, especially for those of us who are craving a contact with Muslim leaders who we can truly engage in dialogue with and feel that we have a genuine discussion coming from the same place. But it's a very powerful thing to watch. And there are many wonderful Muslims. I don't want to get that statement different. I want that clear. But the organizations that often speak for them are connected in ways that leave me feeling very unsettled and very confused